Hey everybody! Brick walls and genealogy. That's what I'm here to talk to you today about. We all hit them, whether you're a beginner or a more advanced family historian. And they're definitely not fun, however, they're not insurmountable. So today I'm going to share with you a story about a few of my ancestors, or one of my ancestors in particular, and the brick wall that I hit. And I'm going to talk about the methods that I used to break down that brick wall and get much further than I expected in my genealogical research. This is Elizabetha. This is my great-great-grandmother. And for a long time, I knew very little about her other than what I had heard from my grandmother and what I could learn from census records. I did know her maiden name, her husband's name, and her nationality, which was German, and two different states that she may have come from. And again, all of this is gathered from census records I found her in. Now, also taken from census records, I knew of around a 2 or 3 year range of immigration dates in which Elizabeth probably came to the US from Germany. And lastly, I had scribbled down on a piece of paper about 15 years ago the words D Vera, or the letters D Vera, and I wasn't sure which or what it meant. I didn't know if it was a city or, a state or someone's name, but my grandmother believed that this was Elizabetha's trunk, which she had brought to the US on her immigration date. Okay, so this might seem like a lot of information to a lot of you, and it actually probably is. However, me being a beginner and also just not really knowing where to look next was probably part of the reason I wasn't able to get any further than that for quite some time. I did search for Elizabeth in passenger lists. I looked for her in Germany through various resources. I searched public family trees for her name, someone with her name and approximate date of birth, approximate immigration date. I looked on FamilySearch.org. I kind of exhausted every resource that I personally, as a beginning genealogist, knew of. And I wasn't really sure where else to turn. I didn't give up, though. What I did was look for Elizabeth on a website called FultonHistory.com, where I often search for old newspapers from New York State. I looked for her under her maiden name and also under her married name, and I actually found several mentions of a Mr. and Mrs. William Gardner. William Gardner was her husband's name, visiting at the home of an Anton File being Elizabeth's maiden name. Now, I thought this was really interesting because I wondered if this could be Elizabeth's brother. Now, if you've been doing genealogy for a while, what you quickly realize is that often not just your direct ancestors need to be researched, but their brothers and sisters are equally important. Siblings are often the key to filling in the rest of the family. So I went back to FamilySearch.org, searched for Elizabeth File and searched for Anton File, and whereas before I'd found, a dozen Elizabeth Files, I was quickly able to narrow down my search to the birth of one Elizabeth File and the birth of a possible brother, Anton File, to the same parents in a little town called Baden. So at this point I was able to add an entire possible nuclear family to my family tree. Now, I did have to wonder if this was all just a really big, convenient coincidence. So I went back to the passenger list now that I had Anton's name, and I found him very quickly. And I actually found that he had immigrated to the US along with parents of the same names as I had found on Family Search. Now, I thought I would just give Elizabeth one last try, so I went back to the passenger lists on Ancestry.com. I searched for her name among passengers going from Europe to the US, and something in the search results caught my eye. There was an Elizabeth File there. Her name was horribly misspelled, of course, but there she was sitting on a ship from Germany to the US, and the ship was called Die Vera. Now, if you think back for a second to what I had scribbled down on a little piece of paper 15 years ago, from the information relayed by my grandmother, you'll see that I had actually come full circle. De Vera was the ship's name, and apparently the ship's name was printed on the chest. So needless to say, I was really excited. Through all these little bits of information here and there, I was able to piece together an entirely new family, a new part of the family, in a little town in Germany. So what lessons did I learn from this whole experience, and how can they possibly help you? Well, first of all, I would say siblings are very important in your family tree research. And not just siblings, but cousins, aunts and uncles, nieces, nephews, step siblings, maybe even neighbors. They can all be equally important in your family history research. Also important, don't overlook lesser used documents like newspaper articles. Whether or not your ancestors were prominent in their communities, it's possible that you'll find them in old newspaper articles, so definitely look for those. Some other ideas for breaking down brick walls. Look to different networks out there. Message boards, email, discussion groups, public tree sites like the World Community Connect project on RootsWeb. Look for living cousins, distant cousins of yours who are living today, if they might have any answers or the research that you're looking for. Double check and triple check all of your records to make sure you haven't made mistakes, or make sure you're not making too many assumptions. Also be sure you have every record possible, not just birth, marriage, and death, but every census record possible for your ancestors. Check for different spellings, and in some cases you might actually need to go through census records manually. Sometimes someone just doesn't show up in a search. It doesn't mean they're not there. Lastly, I'd really like to hear from any of you who have similar or maybe entirely different stories of brick walls that you've encountered in your genealogical research and how you overcame them. And I'm sure everyone else would love to hear those stories as well. So feel free to post a video. Just tell your story briefly in the text comments, whichever you prefer. And I hope to hear from some of you soon. Thanks.